Paranormal Karen, she's so spooky. Paranormal Karen, funny too. Paranormal Karen, she's so spooky. Oh, and did I mention she's funny too? Yeah, cha-cha-cha.
Hey everybody, welcome to Paranormal Karen. I'm not sure if we're running an hour today or with my friend Turner talking UFOs, or if I'll be cutting in the last 20 minutes. I don't know. But just so you know, everybody, you got the Paranormal Karen. This is the podcast. Join me on the Patreon. We're having a blast on the Patreon learning tarot. There are 2 extra Paranormal Karen episodes that are just me, 30 minutes. One is in bed with Paranormal Karen. It's what I'm looking at and reading. The second one is what's going on in Utica, all the crazy paranormal stuff up there. Also, the spiritual protection course is up. We have a bunch of different prices. You can all afford it. And if you can't afford it, send me an email and we'll get you in for free. Maybe you send us some good karma, but Tommy and I did that. It's 4 classes of about 20 to 30 minutes. And we want to make sure you all have it. All the proceeds from it go to shooting my next special. So,
Yes. That all sounds awesome, by the way.
Turner Sparks, by the way. Yes. And now, Turner, I've been working with you all week at the Laugh Factory. I've not had any trouble with your name until we got up here to do my podcast.
Yeah. No, it's fine. I was saying anything that starts with a T and ends with an ER. My brother's named Tyler, so I've been called Tyler my whole life.
Really?
So, yeah. I respond to anything.
Okay.
I don't care.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. So, funny as anything, we're working at the Laugh Factory together. First of all, tell everybody where they can find you to just see your comedy. And whatnot.
Thank you. At Turner Sparks on Instagram, and then turnersparks.com for all tour dates and all that kind of stuff.
Is Sparks your real name?
Yeah.
That's an awesome name.
Thank you.
Okay. So we started talking paranormal, and you, I haven't had a lot of UFO people on, so I'm so excited. Okay. You grew up in New Mexico?
I grew up in Sacramento, California, but both of my parents are from Carlsbad, New Mexico. My uncle still lives there. My cousins grew up there. We used to go there all the time growing up.
So you, and is that near Roswell, or is that just New Mexico?
It's an hour away by car. So it's the southeast corner of New Mexico, where if you drive like 20 minutes to the east, you're in Texas, or just barely to the south, you're in Texas.
Wow.
So they're Texas on 2 sides.
I think when I drove cross country, I think I drove through there. I think so. Well, where did I stay? Maybe I didn't. I know that I made it through the corner. Yeah, I did make it.
It's where the caverns are, the Carlsbad Caverns. Okay. A lot of people know that.
I remember. Yeah, I really kind of like New Mexico.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you guys were there all the time. Now your parents, tell me where your UFO fun starts.
Okay. So my mom, they both grew up in Carlsbad. My parents. It's a town of like 25,000 people.
Wow.
And the nearest airport, now there's a closer one, but at the time, up until really recently, was 3 hours away, El Paso, Texas. So it's very rural and isolated. Right? It's just the desert. It's the desert for 3 hours, and then this little town pops up.
And just for reference, would we figure year that would be? Would that be the 60s, 50s,
So this
60s?
would be the 50s.
50s, okay.
My parents were born in the late 40s, so they were kids in the 50s. And my mother's father, so my grandfather, used to buy a new car every year. He was like a new car guy every year. Yeah. And that was just his thing. Like all of his money went towards buying a new car every year.
What did he do for a living?
A pharmacist.
Oh, God.
Had a local, it was called the Corner Drugstore, local pharmacy in town. And it was also it's like out of the Back to the Future. Imagine the Back to the Future town. You know where they hung out? Where it was like pharmacy, but also you could get milkshakes and soda and all that, and buy magazines. It was just like the hangout.
Yeah, we had that. I think it was S&J, but it was all in one. Or Woolworths all had that stuff. Yes,
exactly.
Yes.
So that's them. And he would buy a new car every year. And one time they were driving, I want to say from like Santa Fe to Carl. Oh, he had just bought the car. So I think he had bought it in Santa Fe, which is northern New Mexico. And was driving like the 4-hour drive south to Carlsbad, where you have to go through Roswell. And this is in the 50s. And I believe it was just my grandmother and my grandfather in the car. And my grandmother is, for context, is like the most doesn't
believe in anything.
Yeah, wouldn't be inclined. Practical, I might be the word, but just she only believes it if she sees it type of person. Mm-hmm. So they're driving, just bought the car, brand new Cadillac, and driving south to Carlsbad, and there's this like giant flash in the sky, like something that she says never seen before or after in her life ever. and the car stops.
Oh.
And it's brand new. So it has 11 miles on, or however many miles they've been driving. And they're out in the middle of nowhere. And so the car stops and they're just stuck there. And then they flag down somebody who goes to then the nearest town and tells them that, hey, these people need help, someone drives back an hour, picks them up, brings them in. They bring the car in and they're in this town for 5 days and no one can figure out what's wrong with the car. It's just completely shattered.
It's not running at all.
Not running at all, and everything's exploded, blown up.
Wow. Okay, I've never heard. This is really interesting because I know they stop a lot of cars, but I've never heard this. Wow.
Yeah, and so it's just our whole life. That's with aliens, right?
Yeah, and we must have been under warranty, right? I hope.
I would imagine. I don't know what they had in the 50s. Yeah, but so that's that, and then just with everyone being from that area, my grandparents, and even though Roswell's an hour away, but it's also a small town, and a lot of these small towns, they all do business together. 1 hour, if you're in a rural place, 1 hour is actually not that far, right?
Right.
If you're in New York City, you might not leave your block for a year. But if you're so my grandparents' generation on both sides just all knew people who in the Roswell was the 1940s, I believe. Mm-hmm. And
I just saw something on this that, because I have this theory that a lot of people have this theory. It's not mine, but we will not have a nuclear war because the aliens will shut it down. They keep making these appearances above, nuclear plants, any place, and they just shut them down. And I just heard it was Stephen Alan Greer was talking about how a nuclear bomb literally shutters through other dimensions. Wow. So when they think we're acting up, that's why they have all of them come in. And there was a story about one time we almost did have one and it didn't launch. Somebody went, I can't remember what it was. I should find out what that was, where we really were going to fire off a nuclear bomb again.
Wow.
And it just wouldn't work. So I think we're never going to have nuclear war, or it's going to be something so small. I don't know what a small nuclear war is.
Yeah.
But they also said that's why they started showing up when we got that technology.
So we did, was it atom bomb or nuke? Japan?
Well, yeah, that was Hiroshima. When did we do Hiroshima?
That was it was to end World War II, so it would have been 1945.
Yeah, so they said that's why all those...
That's about when Roswell was, right? Maybe a few years later? Roswell?
Yes, and when they started kind of making their appearance everywhere. Like, you guys aren't doing that again.
Okay.
I know. Isn't that feel good?
Yeah.
Okay, so they knew all these people.
So it was just kind of... an accepted fact, because they knew people who had direct experience, So it was just kind of an accepted fact that yes, aliens exist. And then we were always brought up to think that how egotistical can we be to think that we're the only people in all these universes?
Isn't it funny how that thought has disappeared? Like, we've turned into narcissists?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Wow. So
we're the only ones that matter.
Okay, so go ahead. I have a million questions. This is great.
So anyway, so that's just kind of how we were brought up. And then when I was in college, I was driving across. I went to school in Miami, Florida University. And so I drove back and forth a lot from California to Miami.
Wow.
And one of the times, or maybe two of the times.
Wait, Sacramento to Miami?
Yeah.
How long did that take you?
I would always do it with friends, and we would do it in 8 days. But you could do it in 4 days if that's all you wanted to do. But I remember we stopped in Las Vegas for 2 days.
That's how I did when
we stayed in New Mexico with my uncle for 2 days. Other place, New Orleans, 2 days, I think, something like that.
Okay, that sounds more fun.
Yeah. So we really made
so you're driving back and forth.
So yeah, and one of the times, a friend of mine who was from Miami, who was just driving back with me to California, was the whole time driving. He was like, "Wow, your parents are from New Mexico." He started asking me about aliens, and he was like, "Well, how far are we from Roswell?" And I'd never been before. I'm like, "I don't know. Let's look it up." And it was an hour. So he's like, "Let's go." So we went to the Alien Museum, and Roswell's just fun in general because the whole town, all the street lights, the lamps, like the street lamps, have aliens on them. It's like this town where they've kind of like, it's their tourist thing, you know? So all the green Martian guys and all that are everywhere. And then the museum is very cool. And it has, I don't know how much you've heard about this or talked about it with other people. But, okay, so it has all of, the most interesting part of this is it had all the newspapers from that day for like a month.
Wow.
And the front page of the Roswell Times or whatever it was, the local newspaper. And the day it happened, it said, just matter-of-factly, the farmers outside, ranchers, I guess, like 20 minutes outside of Roswell, saw aliens yesterday.
Wow.
And, or like a ship, I forget what the exact story is. Something, I think a ship crashed or something like that.
For Roswell, yes.
Yeah. And they have the aliens, and they're doing like autopsies on them. And it was 3 or 4, maybe 5 days of just matter-of-fact updates on, now the aliens are here, they're inspecting them, they're looking at them, they're looking at the ship, this is going on. And then it said, we just got word that from Washington, D.C. is sending people in, and like the federal government's going to be inspecting this. And they're coming in 3 days. And then, they're coming in 2 days. Oh, it's very exciting. They're coming tomorrow. Everyone get ready. That's a big deal if you're in a rural town in the 1940s, that anyone from Washington would be showing up. And they were just kind of getting excited. Like, let's get the town ready. Let's show how cool we are, you know? And then from the day the FBI or whoever it was showed up, not in the paper anymore.
Really?
And never another mention in the paper.
Wow.
Isn't that interesting?
Well, also what's interesting is when they're talking about the autopsies and stuff of who is doing that. Do we know who was doing that? Was it a local doctor? Where do you take that?
Man, I would have to look it up. From what I remember, it was a local doctor, but I don't want to be wrong here. I don't know. Right. But I'm sure it's Googleable, all of the papers. And yeah, that was the most damning or telling evidence to me. The fact that they weren't reporting it as this is a crazy thing. It was like everyone knew the people in town, the townspeople who saw them. It was some guy who, Fred from the church saw the aliens. Just a matter-of-fact thing, not a conspiracy, not a crazy thing, just hey, we all know the guy.
And they had seen them before that. So one crashing it's interesting, but it's not as stunning, right?
They weren't reporting it as stunning. They were reporting it as this happened, Fred saw him, we're going to find out what it is. Wow. Almost like if a big tree fell in the middle of town. Oh, the tree fell down, we're going to figure out what happened.
Wow.
It was just that. And then from the day the federal government showed up, it was out of the paper. And then I almost feel like there might have been 2 weeks later something saying, it was a hoax and all that kind of stuff.
That's, did they have, obviously the stories have to be out there, or someone on their deathbed, or someone has something. I remember the stories of a guy that actually took a piece of metal from it, but it wasn't metal. It would bend, and it was almost like it had its own thing. It would bend back its own way. It was kind of like foil, but it was unbelievably strong. Obviously it's some sort of a thing that we didn't have. And he eventually got cancer from handling it, or there was something about it, but he did take it from the site. But do they talk about it all, or does anybody in your family talk about it all? If everyone saw it, how do you shut it up that fast?
That's the big question. I don't know. They didn't shut it up amongst the people. They shut it up amongst the press. Okay,
so then there's other people's accounts still there.
Yeah, and I personally lived in China for 12 years. I understand how that can be. You can do that.
Oh, that all of a sudden the
if something's
disappears.
Just not in the news for a while, even if people know it's true, there's only so far that word of mouth can spread and people will believe it.
That's why the internet is so dangerous to those people that want to shut us down.
Well, and that's why a lot of countries now censor the internet.
Right.
China included. Because it's not even an internet, it's what do they call it? An intranet or something like that.
So they have to be
This idea that the internet's the ocean, and what China has is a pond next to the ocean that they control.
Okay, I'm going to ask you about that after the aliens.
Okay.
Because that's really kind of fascinating and something I don't know. So that's
how I would I would draw an analogy to that in how you can control the press.
Right.
How you control thought.
Now, when your aunt and uncle or anybody in that area would see them, what did they see? Did they just see a saucer in the sky? Did they see beings?
It was, oh man, it was my grandmother and my grandfather, but I never met my grandfather. He died before I was born, but my grandmother like half raised me. We were with her all the time. So, and that's what I'm saying. She's like so matter of fact. She's the last person on earth who would
make up a story.
Who would make up a story. Yeah, for sure. And she said it was like a something in the sky. It wasn't just a flash. It was like a ship type thing, like I want to get this right, but it was some type of flying thing in the air. And it was there for a second, and they saw it, and then it disappeared, and then the flash, and then the car stopped.
Wow.
Yeah.
I wonder what that was. It's so interesting to me that the aliens' technology also grows.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, we grow and they grow too. They get better technology.
Yeah, and they might grow 100 times faster than we grow, or who knows, right?
Yes. Did they have any abductions in their area? Or none that they knew about?
Not that I heard of. Okay. I don't know of any abductions. Now, where was the abduction? Like that movie Fire in the Sky?
Yes, I know that guy, Travis Walton. That was in Snowflake, Arizona.
Okay.
And that was the interesting thing about that. I just did a Patreon podcast about that. I don't think he was supposed to be taken.
Okay.
Because that whole story is about how, if you watch the movie, which is actually pretty good, he ran out to see them or something. Everybody's yelling, get in the car, get in the car. And he actually got picked up by something and they threw him. There's some interesting stuff about this that didn't make the movie that happened years later. Because a really interesting key to that, well, let's take a break and I'm going to tell you about that on the other side. Okay.
Hey, you. Yes, you. Are you looking for a new podcast that appeals to your scientific curiosity, but is also a little bit spooky?
Show me how I died in a past life.
Well, look no further, because this cat is where it's at.
He had concerns about the ethics surrounding AI, feeling they had achieved consciousness.
Curious Cat Podcast examines the shadowy space where science and the supernatural collide. Listen every week with your host, Jennifer Holtz, as she and her guests explore what it means to be a soul in a meat suit.
We were healing karma together. They were all kind of predestined to resolve something.
Listen on all your favorite streaming apps and continue the conversation on Twitter at CuriousCatPodCA, or find Jennifer and all her links at Jennifer L. Holtz, spelled HOTES.com.
Okay, so we're back. So with Travis Walton, what hasn't been said is that there was a guy that told his brother to when he comes back, when you find him, you can't take him to a regular hospital. You can't take him. He's just going to disappear. If you do that, he'll just be gone again. So what happened was he ran out. If people remember, he ran out. He was in the light. They picked him up about 30 feet in the air and it threw him for some reason. It threw him. And the guys went down the mountain and then they went back for him. And all of when you see Travis Walton speak, he talks about the few things in the movie that didn't work, which were everybody in the car went back. Everybody in the car went back to find him after they kind of calmed down. So it wasn't quite as hostile.
That's from the movie or that's from real life?
That's real life.
Okay.
So
I remember the movie. I saw it when I was a kid. I saw it a long time
ago.
Right.
I just watched it again a while ago because I did do a Patreon on this because I found it so fascinating. So and when I saw him speak, it was the strangest thing because before he went on, at first I was like, I don't know if I want to see this. And I was in the back because I had been performing comedy at this. And he puts on clips from the movie before he goes up to speak. And he hit the floor, had to cover his ears at some point, like turned into a fetal position. Yeah, he really...
Oh, like PTSD?
You were like, okay, yeah. You were like,
wow.
This is not... Yeah. And when I met him, he had to be 50 or 60. He was such talk about a logger. He was so put together that I can't imagine him at 18 not being able to fight off aliens. He was such a big guy, but he So this was the part that didn't get into the movies. It was interesting. So when he was found, he called his brother, and his brother immediately took him to this doctor, whoever. Mm-hmm. And there were so many pieces of information that, number one, all he had was like one dot on his neck, or I don't know where it was. And later they found out he had broken almost all of his bones. They were all fixed.
Whoa.
Yeah. So like they just left, I guess they fixed him and it just left one little dot. But also when he was in the ship, everybody that gets abducted has the telepathic where they can understand. He couldn't understand them. And what he found out when they did a MRI or something, when the ship picked him up and threw him, he bumped his head, and the part of the brain that would be used for telepathy was damaged. So he couldn't understand them when they were trying to communicate with him on the ship. So I think he was not supposed to be on that ship. It just happened, and they kind of broke him. So
was it his physical body was picked up and thrown?
Yes, thrown through the air.
But his mental and his spirit, he was taken into the ship? Is that right or no?
They were driving down. They see this big light.
Yeah.
And he gets out of the truck. Everybody's yelling, don't get out of the truck. He gets out of the truck and starts staring up into it. And for some reason, the thing picks him up by the chest and throws him 30 feet.
Okay.
They drive away. They come back. They can't find him. There's no body. There's no nothing. So apparently the ship kind of tossed him and then picked him back up. And I don't know if he wasn't like a scheduled stop or something. But I almost went when he had the 20-year anniversary, and he went back up to that place where it happened, which is pretty brave. But he said when they do the logging there and stuff, the trees have grown at like twice the rate of the other. Like there's literally with a circle where that happened, the trees are like 3 feet higher and stuff like that. So it's super interesting. So he was up that way. But, it is always interesting to me. So they don't know, or they didn't, just to have them around New Mexico, like there wasn't anything, unless they were abducting people who didn't know it.
Maybe. Like, I always wondered why would aliens pick that place?
Right.
Why would, it seemed like so many things were happening right around there. I don't know what about it. I mean, there's also, so White Sands, New Mexico is not far away. And I think that's where they tested the atom bomb.
Then that would be it.
I'm pretty sure.
That would be it. Because that was really, so we're Googling this as we speak, but this would make sense that they would be in the area where they're trying to shut that down.
Yeah. Oh man, this Hotel Tropicana.
Oh man.
Internet.
It has been a weird, totally weird, week. I've had this, I've had this weird thing where after the show, people keep asking me if they can hug me.
Yeah.
Which is kind of cool. I kind of like it. I think I am going to give free hugs. But then there was a part of me that's like, are they worried about me?
Yeah. Well, I was here last year and...
no hugging?
No, because it was still pandemic-y. So people were like, just stay away, stay away. And I think we were here maybe 6 months before that. And that was... They didn't even want us going out after and shaking hands with the audience or anything,
That's wild.
So now I feel like
we've gone full circle.
Yeah, and people are like, I just need a hug. It's been so long.
Yes. I think that would make sense of the atomic. Also, I wonder if they were testing. They're testing something and they don't want to be over a city or places where they would see them. And now that they have all these shows of paranormal caught on tape and that kind of stuff, I think people are literally looking down at their phone so much they're not seeing anything.
Yeah, so I just did Google it. So the White Sands National Park is in southeast New Mexico. 60 miles north of White Sands is where the world's first atomic bomb was detonated.
Okay.
As a test site. And I do remember that if you watch, there was a movie Fat Man and Little Boy about the two bombs.
Oh.
And in, not Albuquerque, but the other one, Santa Fe, was where, what's the guy's name? He was German, and he was the one who was the architect of the atom bomb. And it was essentially, there was a storefront that was false, and in the back was where we would have the meetings to make the atom bomb.
Oh.
And there was like the foreign spies everywhere in Santa Fe trying to figure out where that place was. And anyway, so that was all New Mexico all around that time. So your theory would add up.
Okay, that sounds about right. You know, it's interesting too. Once, I just was watching this on a show. Once people have been abducted, it's almost like they get good pictures of UFOs or they have a connection to them or something like that. Because I do think it is something of who they show themselves to. Now, all this other stuff that was going on now, I feel like that's us.
Yeah, we were talking about that. So you think that those things they call the tic-tac shaped things that are flying through the ocean and all of the Air Force pilots see all the time? I don't know. I don't think it's us.
Oh, really?
Because we don't have the technology. So I've read about it, and the only way I guess it could be something that all these Air Force pilots are in on. But I don't know if I believe that.
Well, I think, here's my theory on that. Because I do think Area 51 was doing something that, it was almost like how the CIA works. This guy only knows this and this guy only knows this, but they don't know where these two pieces fit together.
Yep.
And I feel like...
Doesn't the Taliban work that way too?
I think they all do. Yeah.
All the terrorist organizations always work.
Anybody with good organization.
So if you capture one person, they can't give you information on the rest because they genuinely don't know it.
And I actually knew a guy that worked for the CIA just for a little while, and his whole job was he had to have a coat ready to go, and he'd get a phone call and he had to go. He had to leave home and go, and he would be given a suitcase and he had to bring that suitcase to there, and that was it.
That's all
he
knew.
He wasn't allowed to open the suitcase, and he wasn't allowed to have it out of his view, and it was So somebody's making sure we don't know all of it.
There's a story, a Area 51 story, and a guy who... Bob Lazar?
Bob Lazar, yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, from Vegas.
Yeah, and he was saying that he was brought in to Area 51 to work on a ship, but his story adds up with what you're saying. He said he didn't totally know what he was working on, and he was only giving a bit and piece of the information so he could do the specific job they needed him to do.
Right.
Right? And he... But what he learned, was it in the 90s when that happened? Or the 80s, maybe?
I think it was the 80s.
It was all this technology that we didn't have at the time.
Yes.
That he predicted, and now we do have the technology.
I think the real, not that there's a real and a fake Air Force or Army, but there is an intelligence part.
Okay.
Like Area 51. They say everything we have, they're 20 years ahead of us. And I know people that live in... not in Vegas, but out in the desert. And there was one lady that she was out in her yard, and a ball came up, and she looks, and it's a guy sitting in it with sunglasses, floating in front of her, waves, and then goes back.
Really?
Yeah, like he was out testing one of their things or something, and she said it was us. So I think we do have that, and I can't even remember now, so they must have done the right thing. I'm like, what are they trying to hide? There was a news story or something where I was like, what is this distraction?
Yeah. So they could be, part of it, this Southwest stuff, this Arizona, Nevada, New Mexico stuff, it could be testing. Right?
It could be. In fact, where I live up in Utica, New York, Rome, New York was the actual first choice for Area 51.
Okay.
And it's this enormous, enormous Air Force base that they ended up abandoning. They took everybody out, so they killed the town.
Wow.
But there's the biggest high school in the country is in Rome, New York, and it's empty.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
There's so many, just as an aside, I feel like upstate New York almost had so many things. Did you know, I read that the first choice, or one of the top 2 or 3 choices for Israel, like the new home for the Jews after World War II, was an island between Buffalo and Canada.
Whoa.
There's some island in a river. There's an island in a river, and they were like, maybe this could be the new home of the Jews, and then they picked Israel.
Wow.
Jerusalem.
Well, they got better weather, I think.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Can you imagine? They would have been as miserable as me.
I think it was the U.S. government that said no.
Wow.
And so, all the countries, all the allies were trying to figure out. Well, maybe,
I wonder if that time we needed we need somebody we need a friend over there.
Probably. We still do, right?
Right.
That's why that's where all the money goes in.
That's right.
Yeah.
And a weird offshoot, I know I believe in my heart the most dangerous man in the world is the Saudi Arabian prince.
Oh, MBS.
Yeah. I know he's not starting any wars and but something about him, I feel like he's the worst of the worst.
He's not a good guy.
He's not a good guy.
Yeah, we could say that for sure. I mean, was it Khashoggi, the Washington Post journalist, who he tortured and limb by limb? I mean, like, it's disgusting. Yeah.
And I think he used to go out with Lindsay Lohan. Is that not a weird side?
No way. Really?
Go ahead, pull out your little Google machine.
I mean, speaking of worst people on earth.
Yes, because, it's really strange how is it Saudi Arabia that's had like, or maybe, Beyonce, or there's some sort of weird sort of American entertainment culture. I don't know that was Saudi Arabia, though.
Where did Beyonce performed for?
And it was a big deal. It wasn't Dubai, because Dubai is still free.
Wasn't it the guy who used to wear, like, he had like an army of like 50 bodyguards who were all like really attractive women? And
I don't remember this.
What country is that?
I feel like it's a movie.
Yeah, and she claimed she didn't know who the person was. She got $1 million to perform for some Middle Eastern dictator.
Yes, there was something with that. But see if Lindsay Lohan went out with...
Yeah, well, this Daily Beast from 2019 article says, inside Lindsay Lohan's bizarre friendship with Saudi Crown Prince.
There you go. They're just friends. They're friends with benefits.
Yeah.
That would be so surreal to me.
Did you ever hear about the comedy show? I don't mind saying this because I'm not going to say names, but in the Seychelles Islands?
No.
Okay. So there's a show that I've heard about. I've never done, where you go, you get paid a lot of money, and they fly you to the Seychelles Islands and you perform, but you don't know who you're performing for.
Oh.
And the theory is that it's one of these Middle Eastern dictators. Or it's obviously a very bad person. It's a person...
It's one that...
Yeah, because it's like a way... You get paid a lot to do it, and it's not...
It's not what we're making this week.
It's not what we're making this week, and it's also not... It's not Chris Rock's not doing it. You get paid at a level that a famous person would be, but the people I know who've done it are not famous people. They're not like super, super famous people.
But they would have been chosen people, maybe?
Yeah, so somebody's gotten it. Yeah, this person is a fan of theirs somehow, or just a fan of comedy. The other angle is it could be somebody who in their country, they're the leader of whatever, pick a country, but in the Middle East, but they're not supposed to like this kind of stuff.
Oh.
So anyway, you perform in front of a curtain, and they're behind the curtain.
You can't even see them?
No, you can't see them.
So how does it go if you go, hey, what do you do for a living?
I don't know.
They go, nothing. We do nothing.
You haven't heard about that?
No.
So it's like you don't get paid $1 million what Beyonce got. But oh man, I'm trying to think of the name.
It's got to be one of the oil guys. It's got to be one of the oil.
It's got to be one, right?
And I wouldn't be surprised if it was the Saudi prince.
It could be him.
Isn't it weird?
Yeah.
He's rich and mean and handsome and.
Yeah.
Like every time I see him, I just think he's so evil. Like I don't know why.
Yes.
I think he has Hitler-esque qualities, and I mean not that. Hitler had you could see the emotional. You can't see it on this guy, and I feel like he could come out from nowhere and really be the problem. And plus, now that he's ruining the petrodollar and making the Chinese money is now backing the gas. Backing the petro.
Okay.
So the petrodollar, we're way off paranormal, but
yeah, sorry.
But this will scare you. The petrodollar, which was that all oil had to be paid for with American dollars. That was the deal we had with Saudi Arabia and all of it.
Okay.
So we kept even China would have to pay with America. Everybody had to pay with American money.
Okay.
So that's where we kept the dollar propped up. So now, not even this bank stuff going on. The Saudis just made a deal with China that now they're paying with Chinese money.
Okay.
So our dollar is about to have a problem. Right. So,
well, the advantage to being a dictator
one of them
is that you don't have to answer to anybody.
Right.
So we tend to talk ourselves into this idea that U.S. our presidents and our politicians don't have to answer to anybody, but ultimately they do. They have to get reelected.
Yeah.
And even if they're not answering to the common voter, they're answering to the money and the, right? There is someone. It could be an evil corporation.
Well, that's even, there's a lose-lose situation, because when he did kill that, one of our guys from the Washington Post, you can't start a war with Saudi Arabia.
No.
And because if they shut off everything, mean, so on the one hand, you're like, we got to go get, because he did this to this guy. And on the other hand, it's like, it's so complicated. There's no way to.
You can't do anything about it. I mean, it's like Animal House. You put them on double secret probation, That's like my favorite thing ever. My dad's favorite car. They're on probation and then they get in trouble again. And the guy's like, well, now you're on double secret. It means nothing,
It does. So I played in the Middle East. I did one of those tours.
Oh, cool.
And we were in Bosnia and Kosovo, were the most interesting places I had ever been.
Yeah.
And they put us in, was it in Bosnia? It was in Bosnia. And we were they had some crazy guy taking us around. Like usually on those military tours, you are watched over with like a hawk. Like when we used to drive around Kosovo, there was a bunch of guys with guns in front of us and behind us.
Okay.
And then when we had to go to the airport, those guys didn't show up. And the guy was so mad. And he was like, but you're making your plane. But I can't believe how unsafe this is.
Wow.
But we're getting you to the airport, right?
Wow.
So we made it. But they, in Bosnia, so they're telling us the story of all that happened, and then they kind of moved us over to the side, and we look over, and it was the guy from Iran, oh God, I can't remember his name now. He was the
president of Iran?
President of Iran.
The guy with the handsome guy with the beard?
Yes.
Oh, who was insane and said the Holocaust didn't happen and stuff? Yeah.
He was like a stone's throw away from us.
Really?
Yes. There was something about...
And where were you? You were in Bosnia.
We were in Bosnia.
Okay.
And we were in this... what is it called? A cemetery. And it was just very odd. And then one of the guys was like, I'm really glad we didn't wear our American uniforms. And then at that point, you're like, what are we doing here?
Yeah,
What's
what?
happening?
Why not?
I know, but it was so, it's so interesting to be, and that's the weird thing about comedy, because if I could, they don't do this anymore. You can't go to Iran. They used to do military tours and stuff, Afghanistan.
Yeah.
And now we can't, well, obviously we can't go to Afghanistan, but, they used to give tours of Saddam Hussein's palace.
Sure. Yeah. My cousin was working in Iraq at the time on the U.S. base. And she has pictures of herself in the palace.
Does she? Because I thought you couldn't take pictures, but I was thinking I would to do a ghost hunt in there to do an investigation.
I mean, this was right after we took it, and tons of soldiers were like, hey, like partying in the palace and stuff.
They put an end to that at one point. It became a little disrespectful after we killed a bunch of them.
Yeah.
That was so weird, but I do remember that. Okay, so I want to come back and I want you to tell me about China really quick.
Okay.
I know that's a little off paranormal topic, but I think it was really interesting what you were saying. And
okay.
All right, folks, we'll be right back on Paranormal Karen.
Many people are unaware just how much hypnotherapy can help them, or think it's only to help lose weight or quit smoking. But there is so much more hypnotherapy can do. It can help with stress, anxiety, insomnia, phobias, performance enhancement, connecting with your spirit guides and higher self. You can even discover past lives and your life between lives. Heal traumas, break habits, find your deepest truth, or just have fun discovering who you really are, all from the comfort of your home. I'm Monique Pliakis. I'm a certified hypnotherapist, and I want to help you. Schedule a free consult by going to www.innerstandingshypnosis.com. That's INNERSTANDINGSHYPNOSIS.com. Innerstandings Hypnosis. Find your power and ignite your inner light.
Okay, so who did Beyonce perform for?
So I just looked it up. It was Gaddafi, who was the guy who got the Arab Spring. Remember the Arab Spring? Where maybe 10 or 12 years ago, all the Middle Eastern countries started having uprisings over their dictators. Mm-hmm. He was like the big one who got dragged into he was a full-on dictator. He had a he had like 50 women bodyguards, and he was like a cartoon character, evil dictator, and he got dragged into the street and murdered in the middle of the street by his own people.
I think I remember this.
And she performed for him for
before that happened.
Yeah,
yes.
Long before that, but long after. We all knew he was a dictator. He exploded a flight. He blew up a flight in the 80s, I think, with a bunch of Syracuse students on it. And full-on terrorist, insane person. And she performed for him for $1 million. And then later on claimed like, oh, I didn't know who that guy was.
I
thought, it's like...
I get mad when actresses don't ask if the makeup company they represent tests on animals. I can't imagine this. Right? You think somebody should know.
Well, they clearly didn't know. They just thought it wouldn't come out. There's no way her management company didn't know who Muammar Gaddafi was.
I hope... I don't know which scenario seems better. I really don't. But, I do feel like there's a couple of things now. It's not my gig, and it's not my, the cabal about musicians or something and all the satanic symbolism and the stuff like that. And I'm not that deep in that conspiracy, but it is kind of fascinating. Like they all, at the Oscars, they all had on the same necklace. They all had on a snake necklace. Like all these different actresses in different dresses had on the same necklace.
Oh, interesting.
Or they do keep giving out these symbols. And there's a lot of, like, I'm sure you can make anything look, but it is kind of weird. So also... I don't know. I don't think you could ever do this with comics, but I wonder with there's so many good singers and musicians. I wonder if one does get pulled aside and they're like, listen, if you want to be famous, here's what's going to happen.
Maybe. I tend to think money drives most stuff.
Right.
I don't think she performed for him because she supports him. I think it was like, hey, here's $1 million. And don't look this guy up.
And that gets into my continuous question: how much money do you need?
Yeah, it's power, it's greed, right?
It's like Jeff Bezos is the biggest example of poverty thinking I've ever seen, because he'll never have enough.
He'll never have enough because he wants to be number one. Yeah. And it's gross.
And by the way, folks, if you're on my Patreon, I'm doing a special one on there's a really great, now I can't even say what it is. It's the 55th gene key, and they talk about all money is fear. So when you stop fearing it and just passing it, that's when you get it, or you don't have to worry about it, which I believe is true.
I heard, speaking of money, I once read a book, or maybe saw a speech. It was a lecture by Warren Buffett. You know Warren Buffett?
I have a friend that performs for Warren Buffett. She's his favorite comedian.
Awesome. So he said, someone asked, what's the key to your success? And he said, if you can get rid of greed and get rid of fear, you can do anything. And it's the fear of failure and the greed of needing more and more, like always needing, and if you can get rid of those two things are what hampers you.
I think I'm getting better about that. Like the fear does come back, but it's almost like right now I'm buying big chunk items that I wouldn't buy before. And Tom has that iPhone 14, which is amazing. And I can shoot some of my specials on that phone. And I almost was just like, just get it. But I like to pay for things right out. But it feels like I'm getting to that place, and money is coming in. Like money is showing up.
That's great.
Yeah. So we'll see. Right now we're taping this in March, and I know it's about to get weird. But I have always had, whenever we've had a recession or something terrible, I've always been okay. I've always been more than okay, actually.
It's great. And fear is that idea that, well, I want to say this for us on stage, I want to say this on stage, but what if my audience, what if that's the thing that they don't like and then they go away?
Right.
Or what if that stops me from getting this other thing because I'm saying this belief and then they don't believe what I believe? When ultimately the people who are the best artists are saying exactly what they want to say all the time, right?
Yes.
And people find you.
I couldn't agree more. And then if you switch, you might end up with a new audience or something like that.
Yeah.
But and this is the funniest thing. Since I started painting, I have not seen any bad art. Like all art fascinates me now. Like who painted that sign? Or,
oh, cool.
oh, look, a little kid made that. It's great. What are they trying to say?
Yeah.
So I feel like that's a little bit about comedy. Like, and it's funny because right now we both were saying how I don't want to be a political comic. That's not my thing.
Yeah.
But I do admire some of the people that are doing it now.
I think that we're thankfully back to how political comedy was before. We had political comedy in the 80s and 90s, but it was people who actually knew something about politics.
Yeah.
Just like we had political bands. I'm really into punk rock, and there's a few bands who are great political punk rock bands, like Bad Religion and stuff. But they also research it, and they know a ton about it, and they're coming from an informed position. We got to a point in comedy, and it happened in music too, where everyone thought they needed to have political jokes.
And they were just the skim of what the public heard on the news today, right?
And it was like Trump's orange,
right?
And like, oh my gosh.
Orange is the new orange.
And it was like, can we get back to the point where there's 5 of them and they're really good at it? And there's, what's that one guy in San Francisco? I can't think of his name right now. But
Mort Saul?
Him, and then there was a younger guy, I forget.
Will Durst.
Will Durst is who I'm thinking of.
But I wonder what Will Durst is still doing. That's interesting. I would love to look him up.
He's still around San Francisco.
Is he? Okay.
He pops up at the Throckmorton sometimes.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I hope he does when I'm there. So tell us about China. About, now you were there doing what?
I moved there to teach English in 2004. I did that for 1 year. And then,
you were doing comedy or weren't? You weren't?
Not initially, no. So then I opened a business there. I stayed there for 12 years in total, mostly because after 1 year of the teaching English, I opened a business, and that was 10 years. It took 10 years. And then about in 2000, so I moved there in 2004. In 2009, I was really always been interested in stand-up, but I looked it up, there's nowhere to do it. So I started an open mic at a friend's like little tiny bar. And then that turned into shows that I was producing.
And a lot of people did it at that time. When you say a friend, is this a Chinese friend or an American friend?
This is an American guy who had just recently opened essentially a dive bar in town for Chinese people and expats, and kind of like just like an American-style dive bar in China.
So there were enough Americans living in China?
Yes.
And they were doing business.
And not only American, people from around the world who spoke English.
Okay.
Yeah. So in the city I lived in, it is called Suzhou. 100 of the Fortune 500 companies had representation in that city.
Oh.
This is a city that now has 10 million people that no one's ever heard of. That's how big China is. There was 6 to 7 million at the time.
Wow. And
now there's 10 million. And it was 50 miles from Shanghai, but a totally different city, like an independent city. And so I would almost compare it like Philly to New York City, Philadelphia, New York City. And then I started this open mic. At first it was once a month. It was literally just a thing to do, like a hobby. And then we went once a week, and then eventually started producing shows at bars around town, in my town and Shanghai.
And who was doing the shows? Just local guys who were trying to do it? Just local?
Yeah, so at first it was me and then one other friend who was interested, and then we were begging all of our friends to do it with us so that we had enough people to even put on a show.
Oh, wow.
But it was no one who had ever performed before, And that was the first year. And then by the second year, a little group in Shanghai was doing the same thing a year after us. And pretty quickly, somebody put the two of us in touch. It was like, hey, you guys are doing this, you should connect. And then we started working together. And at least by the second year, it was 10 people who were actually interested in doing comedy who were doing it.
Great.
And the 10 of us just formed this crew, and we were the only ones performing every time and putting it on and writing new material. And we were doing a new 10 minutes every 6 weeks because it was the same audience coming back all the time. And then eventually we started a tour in late 2012. And that's when Tom Rhodes came over, and Jimmy Schubert and Butch Bradley and
Paul Pio.
Yeah, he went to Hong Kong. He didn't come and do ours, but Paul Ogata, a million people.
Amazing. Okay, so you're in this part of China that is American okay.
Sure. Yeah.
What are, like, I know when you play in the Middle East, one of the things they say, I don't know how much they hold you to this, but you can be arrested for swearing in the Middle East.
Okay.
So I think, and I don't know if that meant on base if you slip,
Yeah.
you know,
Okay.
I don't know how much that is. And it's actually punishable by death.
Wow.
So I don't know if you were standing in the marketplace or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
But so in China, what are the different rules? What are the, like you said, they don't have the internet.
So they have their own version of the internet, and they call it the internet. But as I was saying, I don't know if I said this on air or off air.
You said, you did internet.
So if you imagine the internet being the ocean, what China has is a pond next to the ocean.
How is that technically possible?
The way they do it is, in reality, it is the internet, but they block so much of it from coming in to the Chinese servers.
Okay.
That 90% of what we have access to is not. If you go on Google, it just says page does not exist.
Okay.
So if you go to even like New York Times, nytimes.com, page does not exist. WashingtonPost.com, page does not exist.
Did you find a way out of that? Or did you just have to do it, or otherwise you'd be arrested or something?
No, you won't. So it's you can get a VPN.
Okay, that's what everyone was saying. If they kick TikTok out of America to get an international VPN,
that's what you'd have to do.
Okay.
So, but now China's starting to block VPNs. So VPNs are even having trouble. So there was, you can almost think of China as two different countries at two different times, and it's all very recent. So when I was there, 2004 to like 2013, and even from the 90s to 2013, it was a different president, and it's the same Communist Party, but you should think of it as two different things. And it was a different president, and the concept of the government was, we want to open up to the world. So we want to bring foreigners in, foreign business in, foreign ideas, foreign thoughts, because we want to build up our Chinese population, make them, let them be smart and grow, and they will start companies that will bring in revenue.
Something we don't really do in America.
Grow up. Well, I think we do, but yeah. So that will grow up that will build our economy, build our country, build our people, right? So that was that. And so at that time, that's why our comedy club could exist. Because they looked at us, we were technically illegal. It's illegal in China to have a gathering of over 50 people for any reason without a permit.
Okay,
so
because they think you're starting a new party.
You might be. Okay. Yeah, so any church service needs a permit. Any a house party, if it's more than 50 people, would need that, especially a comedy club that was 100 seats. But what that government looked at us as these guys are doing something that's entertaining the foreign business people that we want here, because they're educating our people.
Now, did you really have that much interaction with the government, or they? At
that time, no.
Okay.
It was just, we were operating in a gray area, and they knew we existed, but decided not to let it go, because they wanted these people here, and they're like, well, if they're bored, they're not going to be here, so.
Now, if somebody decided that was not how they...
Yes.
What would have happened to you? Would they just have shut you down, or would you be in jail?
So it happened. So then when the new government took over in 2013, it was the exact reverse policy. The policy was, our people have learned all they need to learn, get foreigners out of our country. All foreigners need to go.
Wow.
And it's our time now. It's a very scary, it's the America First thing, but for them. So it's China. We're now enough of everyone else. We're now the leaders of the world. We're taking over. This is our time. And part of that is getting rid of foreigners. And part of that is foreigners, the ideas that foreigners are bringing.
Free speech, yeah.
We're now seen as a threat as opposed to a positive, right? And so part of that also was we weren't needed anymore. Our comedy club wasn't needed anymore. So it took till 2018 for them to get around to us. But they eventually shut down our club. And within 2 weeks, replaced us with a Chinese-owned, Chinese-language stand-up comedy club that they could more easily control because they understood everything that people were saying on stage.
And did your friend, was it his bar or just in general? You guys didn't get any bookings. Like I'm thinking.
Oh, so I skipped a point. So by this point in 2014, we opened our own club.
Oh, okay, got it.
So we now had a comedy club.
Okay.
And actually, in early 2018, I was already living in the U.S. We sold the club to Live Nation.
Okay.
So they bought our club, and then they wanted to make them like punchlines around Asia, Punchline Comedy Club.
But then they had to deal with
They got shut down by the government.
Ah, nice to sell it.
Yeah, so we got out 10 months after they bought it.
Such a dark business. They got their karma. All right.
Yeah. So we had, but we told it was self-censorship is a pretty big thing, and pretty powerful in the sense that we knew all along from the time we started day one. If anyone on our stage was saying something bad about the Chinese government,
you had to shut it down.
We had to, because if someone in the audience was offended, think of cancel culture here, Same thing. If somebody's in the audience, it's not like they were spies, like actual spies, but if they were offended and they went, oh, man, I disagree with that person, our government's great, and then they went and told their uncle who's in the government, we're done. So it's cancel culture on a real level. You're literally out of business. Right.
But they wouldn't have put you in jail, you don't think?
No, I don't think so.
It wasn't that. It was bad, but it wasn't.
I never had the fear of prison or anything
what was that. That's good to know. Okay, because there was that weird thing where a kid spray painted cars or something and they were going to
in Singapore.
Him. Okay.
They were gonna. He was getting.
He was being a
caned. He was being caned. He was the son of a diplomat.
Oh,
like a spoiled rich kid in Singapore, who they have very strict rules and everyone knows about. They're very obvious rules.
He was like, my dad's did it,
and he was walking, tagging, spray painting cars, and he got arrested. And that was a while ago because I remember Bill Clinton negotiated down from like 6 canings to 3 or something like that.
I don't mean to laugh, but it is.
No, that guy deserves what he gets.
He should have got 6.
I'm a big proponent of if you need to know the laws of the country you're in.
I agree.
And follow those laws.
Yeah.
And if you're in trouble, I don't think our government should come save you. And we don't, for the most.
Right.
If you're in trouble for doing something that you legitimately did and you broke a law in that country,
then they got to deal with it.
And if this kid wasn't saying. He wasn't championing free speech. He was tagging cars.
Yeah. And even that lady, the basketball player, she didn't really. It wasn't like they made it. Some people make it sound like she's bringing weed over She had like a CBD oil, right?
CBD oil, and she was a target. Yeah, because she was. I mean, the idea that she was famous.
That one was good that we negotiated, I think. But
yeah.
I don't think she did. She wasn't harming other people, and she may have even forgot it was in her suitcase or something. That one doesn't match up. But yeah, I agree with you. I think we have to, there's always this weird, people hiking in Iran. Mm-hmm. And I'm a little obsessed with Iran because I love Iranian men. But there's always somebody that gets caught hiking there. I looked it up, and it looks like English people from England are welcome there, and the Iranian people are supposed to be like the friendliest people you'll ever meet. Like
I've heard that.
They actually have a thing where they so friendly they lie to you all the time.
Okay,
like it's polite to lie as long as you're being nice or something. And it's supposed to be beautiful. But there's always somebody, or North Korea. Somebody's always hiking, and they end up in North Korea, and you're like, what are you doing?
Yeah, the North Korea thing. Yeah.
What are you doing? You
gotta know where the borders are.
Right. Right. And we're always negotiating them out, which is genuinely a mistake, but it's like really, so China's worse now, huh?
Yeah, so at the time we would back to the censorship stuff, we would just kind of tell people before they went on stage, hey, here are the few things to not talk about. And almost everybody was like, yeah, I don't have, this is like that. Jimmy Schubert coming. He's like, my act is not about the Chinese government. Don't worry. So everyone was very cool about it. We didn't, and the concern was we wouldn't go to jail, but it would shut our whole scene down. And we ended up getting to a point where our scene was like 100 people. And it was a really thriving 5-day-a-week comedy club. And do you want to be the person that shut our scene down because you wanted to be this cool guy on stage that said what you weren't supposed to say? And everyone was cool about it. We didn't have a single problem.
Okay. So now, since I've kept you here way longer than I told you, but this is fascinating. So what is your view? Like, China really is a problem for us now, or no? Because I don't think we can fight China. I think if China shuts us off, all our stuff is made there.
Okay, can I present the opposite angle?
Please do.
Okay,
yeah.
So my wife is Chinese, and I'm very close with all of her side of the family and relatives and everything. And what the uncles constantly say is the exact opposite of what you just said.
Oh, they think that we have everything they need.
They go, if America, we own all America's debt. If they decide to stop paying us, we're done.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So what that presents is that we need each other.
I think so, yeah.
This is why I genuinely don't think war. Well, I didn't think war would happen in the past. I still don't really think it will. The only reason why it might is because the current president of China is a one of one. You can compare him to Putin pretty closely. So he's isolated himself from a lot of even the government officials within the country. And so he's not as predictable as the previous ones were.
So he might be okay pulling a fast one and hoping it does it.
For self-preservation. I don't know if he's acting on the best interest of the country as he is the best interest of himself. So the best interest of the country is to never go to war with the U.S. because we're almost one economy. We buy everything from them. If we stop buying, who's buying from them? And then but we need them because they make all of our stuff. If they stop making our stuff, who makes our stuff?
Right.
So
I'm really glad to hear that. And you know what's funny is I don't think unless we were somehow at war with Canada or Mexico, we're not going to have a war on this land, which is really like, I don't know. I don't know why I've been thinking about the Iraq war so much, but it really makes me sad. Like, we really made a mess.
Yes, and Iraq, Afghanistan.
Like, what are we doing? We're
especially Iraq, because it was never connected to 9/11.
You know what else? I get so insane because Nicole Wallace is on MSNBC, and everybody thinks she's great, and nobody connects that she was a spokesperson for Bush.
Oh, really?
So she was lying to us. She's part of the problem. Like, how do you go, oh, shoot, I killed 1 million people? And just
be able to sleep at night,
and then look down your nose at whomever. Look down your nose at Republicans.
Yeah.
Well, I guess they were part of it too, but I just feel like it's so funny how fast that just goes away. Oh yeah, she killed me.
Yeah, with Iraq is so. I mean, Afghanistan. So we have on my podcast, Lost in America. I'll plug it.
Your podcast, yes, because this is really interesting. I can't wait to listen to your podcast.
Oh, thanks. We talk to comedians every week. So what we do is we pick a global news story. That's the big story when you click on the world section of whatever paper you read or site you read, but we only really get like one article about it or the headline or something. We pick that story and find a comedian who lives in that country and they explain it to us. Oh. So one of our best guests is a guy who was the #1 comedian in Afghanistan for the last 20 years. His name's C.R. Mateen.
I remember somebody. Yes, okay. I remember seeing him somewhere. Okay.
So he had a show called Shabaki Khanda on Tolo TV, which was like their NBC, and it started once we came in because all of a sudden they were free speech was allowed. Once the U.S. military post 9/11, 2004, whenever we got everything in place. Everything was allowed to say on TV, and he had almost like a Chappelle Show type sketch comedy show. 3 guys, and they played all the parts, and it was satirical. It was making fun of different people in the government. It was really pushing the boundaries. And when Biden left, he was instantly being hunted by the Taliban. And he spent 2.5 months hiding out.
Oh.
And myself and this guy Donnie Dolzan, who's who owns Stand Up New York Comedy Club, he and I were working in contact with him for 2 months, trying to help him get out of the country. And he couldn't get out because he had never been, we were getting out translators and all that stuff, remember? But we weren't getting out. He had done shows for U.S. diplomats.
But he didn't have enough clout.
He wasn't high enough up. Oh. So he eventually, and then we lost touch with him for 3 months. And finally got back in touch, and he was at a base, in a U.S. military base in the United Arab Emirates. And then just a couple months ago, he got to Canada. And now he lives in Canada. But it was him and his whole family were in hideout places around Kabul and then out in like little villages and stuff. And the way they ended up getting out from Kabul, they figured out they could get out of this airport if they could get there, which was like 5 hours away from Kabul. But even getting out the city was impossible because there was Taliban checkpoints everywhere. And what they did was they got a bus full of celebrities and dressed them all up as different people, and in like men dressed up like women and everything, said they were on their way to a bus on the way to a wedding outside of Kabul they needed to go, and they got through the checkpoints that way. But if they would have checked in, everyone would be dead.
I hope someoe's making his movie.
I know.
And now the people there that are just, why did we just go?
It was go without a plan. You know, I understand the idea we want to get out, but this idea, it became political. Biden made it. We have to leave. Remember, by 9/11, he had to leave by the 20th anniversary. That's such a political date. Right. And he told everyone we were leaving, so the Taliban knew we were leaving. Everyone knew it wasn't, and there was no pre-planning, so we were just gone. Anyway, it was a disaster.
That's I hate to say it, but we really make messes everywhere. Like, I know you want to have American pride and everything, but you'll know, and everyone on my thing knows the media is horrific. Horrific.
Oh, agreed.
And they only show us things like that if they have to.
And that's why we try to get the real story from the people who were there. We also have another friend who, I know you and I disagree on this, but a friend I started comedy with who's in China. Anyway, so another guest we have on regularly is a friend of mine who I started comedy with in China. His name's Misha Kalin, and he's originally from Belarus. After we all left China, so a lot of people, to finish that China story, a lot of us kind of left at the same time because we were being pushed out, right? Our businesses were being taken away.
So you weren't being shoved out by the government. You just didn't have the work anymore.
You didn't have the work. A lot of people couldn't get their visas renewed when they went to renew their business visa because
And you married a Chinese woman?
Yes, my wife's Chinese. Yeah. Okay. And I do go back as a tourist sometimes. I have a tourist visa, but I can't work there. And so anyway, he moved back to Belarus and then started a little comedy scene there. And then a couple years ago, Lukashenko is the dictator of Belarus, and Putin's propping him up. He lost the election, but Putin came in with the military and said, no, he stays. And so when that happened, my friend Misha was like, it's time to get out of Belarus. Russia controls us. And he moved to Ukraine. And then Putin came for Ukraine. So if you blame anyone, blame Misha.
Well, I, as much as on the politics of what's going on, we may disagree.
Yeah.
I do that. The Ukrainians are getting pummeled. Like they keep saying they're they can't believe they're beating Russia. And I think they're not. Maybe I hope they are.
Well, so he's, it's so hard to know which media to trust. They're reporting drastically different things. But anyway, he's now joined. The only way for him to stay in Ukraine was to join the military.
Oh, no. So he's in the military.
Yeah. So he's in a Belarusian battalion of the Ukrainian military. And he's fighting. And he's doing it by choice. He's like very happy that he's doing it. And he believes he's making a difference and is fighting and
that's
everything.
Good because they had some footage of Ukrainians being dragged off to fight that didn't want to go. Like they're running out of people. Maybe, you know what I mean? But
who knows what's real?
Who knows what's real?
There's so much of that you find out later it was staged. It was like a movie they made. It's like with all this AI, it's hard to know what to believe.
It is on everything. It is. I think that's the place we're going where it is to believe nothing. That's why. Yeah, I don't know. Anyways, fascinating. Turner, this was great. I know we started UFOs and we ended up China. And I am going to be a fan of your podcast. I'm going to have you find it on my phone, and because this sounds fascinating. And if for some reason you ever need a UFO episode or a paranormal episode, not UFO, but you know where to find me. So tell everyone where to find you, where to find the podcast, all the stuff that.
Thank you. So the podcast is Lost in America. It's on whatever podcast app you have. And then at Turner Sparks on Instagram, I put new stand-up clips up a lot. And then turnersparks.com for tour dates. So I tour all over the U.S. and other places, Australia.
And you're based in New York.
Based in New York.
The good New York, not where I am.
Yeah, New York City, Brooklyn, New York. So if you're in New York, just go to my website. I also post where I'm doing spots up all the time. So when I'm in New York, I'm on stage all the time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, and I just want to say you're hilarious. This has been our first week working together, and it's been a blast. It's super funny.
It has been such a positive. It's 3 positive energy comics, which is kind of rare. So it's been great. And well, thank you so much, Turner.
Thank you,
and thank you everybody for listening. And thanks to Mike at Uno Rising Media. And folks, we'll see you next week. I promise you extra demons next week since we were, but this could be one of my favorites. Just so fascinating. All right, everybody, have a great week.